This is the 2021 PTC User Arbortext Symposium. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We're going to go through and have a couple of customer presentations. We're going to go through an introduction, which I'll be doing here. This will be recorded and you'll be able to go back and view this at a later point as well. So thank you. The other quick note too is if you have any questions, there's a Q&A down at the bottom of your screen inside of Zoom. If you will select that, go ahead and post your questions there. Also, if somebody else posts a question that you also have, please upvote that. So we will be watching the Q&A and be focused on the answer or the questions that get upvoted as well. So if you have any issues, please ping one of the panelists and they can help you out. So again, welcome and thank you for joining. So, okay, so today's agenda. So we're going to go through an introduction. So I'll take the first 15 minutes. We'll talk about PTC User. We'll talk about the technical committee and a couple of other things. At 10:15, then we'll have our first customer presentation presented by Eric Graham. And then at 11, we'll have our second customer presentation presented by Chris Goolsby. Sorry. And then at 11:45, we'll have our third customer presentation presented by Steve Stoner. And then at 12:30, we will have a Arbortext product update, and that'll be presented by Patty and her team at PTC. So that's our agenda for today. And so we'll get right into it. So PTC User. For those of you who are not familiar with what PTC User is, PTC User is a customer organization. So it's made up of customers. It's been in operation 31 years, and it's really designed by customers for customers. So we have a couple of meetings. So we have a winter event, and then we meet at LiveWorks each year. And then through PTC User, we do the technical committees. We do working groups, and we also do regional user groups as well. So there's a couple of other forums that we go through PTC User. So the main mission of PTC User is to educate, advocate, and support. So, and this is all around PTC products, right? So this includes PLM products, CAD products, SLM products, so Arbortext and all of the Arbortext products, as well as the Publish engine and other pieces as well. So, okay. So our board of directors, I bring this up, I'm not going to go through each and every person individually, but I really wanted to just touch on the base that our board of directors are made up of customers, right? So as you can see, looking at the people that make up our board, it goes across many different customers, some very large, some not as quite as large. So, but it's made up of many different customers. And so this board of directors works with the PTC User partners and associates. So we don't do it completely on our own. So we work with PTC hand in hand to put on those events and also do that advocate piece of our mission. And then so at PTC, we work with a few different people, including Jim Burrows and Debbie Schneider, Jamie Lee. I think many of you may know them. We also work with people outside of PTC. So we've got an event planning. We work with Rosemary Gavin on that. We have a website and that we work with. So Member Suite and Breezio for our portal services. So that's the website and the TCs and all of those pieces. We have legal and accounting partners as well, and industry partners and industry partner solution network, which we're currently developing as well. So, okay, so technical committee. So this is so we're in the technical authoring and management delivery TC. So this is specifically around those Arbortext products. So we also have other TCs specific. So in the CAD world, we have Creo System Admin, we have ECAD. There's all sorts of different technical committees related to that. We have AR, VR, ThingWorks, PLM, So, but we're going to primarily focus on the technical authoring. And then we also, within the, related to that, we have a technical committee for Servigistics as well. So the technical authoring and management, TC. So I'm the chairman. I'm Paul Hartwig. I work for Train Technologies as a solution architect. And so the areas that are my responsibility are Arbortext editor and style sheets, as well as Creo Illustrate and IsoDraw. So any of those pieces that make up the technical documentation. So I also own the content delivery piece that goes out to our customers as well. And so our PTC liaison is Patty Lutsky, who I work with quite closely. We talk quite a bit about you know, what things we want to talk about in the future. You know, so meeting planning. We talk about different things as what we can provide PTC from the TC as far as, you know, again, you know, doing that advocate piece and so on. So again, this TC covers that Arbortext editor, all of the Arbortext products, basically the print publisher, the delivery, illustrations, operations. So you can read the whole thing. But we cover quite a bit of different areas within this realm of technical documentation. So as the TC chair, I basically I own or I help PTC user members and PTC get value. That's my main objective, right? So I will maintain a regular meeting. So Brian and I have been working on trying to make a regular cadence for meetings. So and I'll monitor working groups, ensure progress, and raise issues with the board when necessary. I'll own the agenda for the PTC winter and spring events, which we actually have another event scheduled, and we'll cover that here in a couple of minutes. And then there's also a monthly TC chair, so meeting that I can talk with other chairs and we can discuss, like if we have a general topic between, say, this TC and the Servigistics, we can coordinate and have a discussion around that as well. So. Okay, so typical technical committee meeting. And so what we typically try to do is we'll try to have a member brief. So this helps everybody get to know one another. So we'll try to have between 1 and 3 members give an overview of their implementation. So we follow this standard format. We talk about the implementation, their top issues, future plans in the standard format that you can see on the right-hand side. And again, this is really to spur the conversation. So this helps the TC members get to know each other, but it also, there's a lot of conversation that comes out of these. You know, so if you're talking about a current implementation issue that you're having, you know, there's a good chance that somebody else has already seen that and potentially resolved it. So these are really, it's not structured in such a way that, you know, this becomes just a one-way conversation. This is really meant to start the conversation between multiple group members. So we also will talk about any working groups and status updates. So we'll give that back to the technical committee, and then we'll talk about old and new business. So within that, we have a couple of things that we've been talking about. So, you know, we'll do this, but we've also been talking about developing, I'm calling it a top 10 wish list here, but it's really kind of a wish list of things that we'd like to see the product do, or the direction the product would go. And so what the idea is that as we meet and go forward, we'll generate this list and we'll prioritize it. We'll give PTC, you know, some use cases around it, so they can bring that in and potentially use that to develop their roadmap. So this is not something where PTC has said, you know, we'll do everything on your list, but this is more of a way for customers to give feedback back to PTC as to the direction that they would like to see the product go. So, and then of course we're always spawning new working groups. So a working group is essentially a group of people who will meet around a specific topic, right? So if there's a specific topic within, say, Arbortext editor that that a group of members want to discuss, we'll launch a working group specifically for that, and then we'll track that and provide progress back. So, okay, so next meeting. So we actually have 2 meetings already on the calendar. So July 29th from 10 to 11 Central Time, and then August 26th again from 10 to 11 Central Time. So put those on your calendar. We will be planning on having meetings then. Again, the rough agenda, kind of following the previous slide, is we'll have member briefs. We're of course always looking for volunteers to provide those member briefs, and you can reach out to myself or Brian if you're interested in providing that. For the next TC, I will also be providing a member brief, so you guys can get to know me a little bit more and the implementation that we have at Train Technologies. We typically go through an introduction of attendees, especially new attendees. But as we're trying to get this going again, we'll probably go through all of the attendees. We'll work on that development of that wish list. So again, we'll do this in a structured manner, but we're really looking at what types of things are customers trying to solve, and provide that feedback back to PTC. And then of course we're always looking for additional topics, and so they can be DITA related, Windchill or other implementation, as it relates to technical authoring. So again, if you've got a topic, we're here to work with you and provide that. So okay, so we also talked about the winter events and the PTC Live. So we're already in the planning stages for the 2022 event, and so we have an event planned for March of 2022 in Orlando, and we'll be calling for abstracts soon as well. So an abstract is essentially an idea of what you would like to present, and so we'll be going through that process and trying to build that agenda for that meeting. And so at this point, we are planning to meet live, and of course, unless things change. But we're currently planning for Orlando in March. So okay, so again, the live event is about networking, mutual learning, peer-to-peer. So it takes that TC or that technical committee and kind of builds on that in a face-to-face event. So again, the other thing that's kind of nice is PTC is also going to be there, and I believe that they're going to have some training and some usability labs as well. So, but again, we're really kind of building that agenda out now, and so we'll provide that information as it becomes available. So, okay, so that's my 15 minutes of introduction. Does anybody have a question before we move on to the first customer presentation?
Hey, Paul, how do I join a technical committee?
Oh, yes, thank you. Completely missed that. So going to ptcuser.org, there's a see if I can bring this up here. So under ptcuser.org, that is our site. You can join a technical committee here. So first of all, you'll have to create a user ID. And again, this is all free. So as you, of course, I'm logged in here, but as you come in, you can create a new ID, and then you can go into the committees, and there's the about technical committees, and you'll see the list of all of them here, and you can join by selecting one of these. So, and again, we are the technical authoring and management. And so you request to join that, and we'll it gets sent to Brian and myself, and we'll make sure that you get included in all of the upcoming agenda items and stuff. Okay. Any other questions? All right, Eric, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, so I will stop sharing if you want to share your screen.
All right, let me know when you see it.
I can see it.
Wonderful. All right, hello everyone. My name is Eric Graham. I'm a technical writer. I graduated from Michigan Technological University in 2004 with a degree in scientific and technical communication. And I've spent the last 16 years mostly working as a technical writer with short forays into marketing and engineering. I've spent the last 6 years at Stryker and have been fortunate to train under and now work alongside Jennifer Maynard, who has presented in this forum in previous years. One thing that stands out from each of the 3 large employers I've had is change. I've experienced changes to PLM systems multiple times, changes to ERP systems multiple times, and changes to publishing systems multiple times. In different roles, my audience has changed. The voicing in my writing has changed, and the tools I use to communicate have changed. Change is why I'm here talking with you today. Change is difficult, it's challenging, but without it, improvement is impossible. There is no growth without change. We talk a lot about the benefits of topic-based authoring and structured authoring. We talk about how much more efficient we can be, how we save time, money, and effort. This technology has been available for years, nearly decades. So why don't we see more publishing teams using it? For all of its benefits, why is there sometimes more talk than there is action? Why do some teams experiment, dabble, and then abandon structured authoring? It's not because the promise is a lie. Quite the contrary. The savings, both cost and time, are real. They've been demonstrated time and again. What is it then that separates those who realize the benefits and those who do not? The simple answer is that it's change, and not a small change at that. The move from traditional desktop publishing to structured authoring is a big change, not just in the tools, not just the processes, but all the way down to the fundamental philosophies of topic-based authoring and the DITA architecture. Let me repeat that because I think it's worth emphasizing. The change from traditional desktop publishing to topic-based authoring and flexible publishing is a change in philosophy more than it is a change in the tools. Let's talk for a minute about the psychology of change. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross introduced us to a 6-stage change curve in her 1969 book called Death and Dying. As the title indicates, the curve was originally formulated to model the experience of loss and grief. It has, over the last 50 years, been adapted to help us understand the psychology of change. This model describes how a person faced with significant change initially experiences shock and denial. Once the shock wears off, they feel anger and irritation. Following that, they attempt bargaining and hope for some kind of compromise. When they realize that the change is inevitable, they experience depression and become demotivated. The next stage is acceptance, which then permits them to move forward into the next chapter of their life, where, hopefully, the person is able to find meaning from the change. For a humorous look at the crossover between structured authoring and stages of change, take a look at Max Swisher's recent post at contentrules.com. It was a rather timely inspiration for my talk today. I want to share with you some of my thought process and preparation for training and onboarding a dozen writers into Arbortext and Windchill over the last year and a half here at Stryker. I want to show you how I structured my training, along with what went well and what didn't. Much like the Kubler-Ross model shows us how people process change, there are models for leading people through change. Some popular examples are the ADKAR model and John Kotter's 8-step change model. The ADKAR model works by creating awareness, building desire, sharing knowledge, fostering ability, and reinforcing the change. John Kotter's 8 steps are to create urgency, form a powerful coalition, create a vision for change, communicate the vision, empower action, create quick wins, build on the change, and make it stick. These models have been put to the test many times, always with the goal of accelerating the change curve. You'll see bits and pieces of those models incorporated into my strategy over the next few minutes. When I began to sketch out my training strategy for these 12 new writers, I approached it not unlike many other projects throughout my career. My first step was to consider the audience. As writers, we know that it's incredibly important to understand what your audience does and does not know, what they need to know, and how they prefer to communicate. So which language, the vocabulary you use, and what you'll use as analogies or comparative examples. My team consisted of a broad range of experience levels, from beginners to experienced writers. This meant that I would have to start all the way at the beginning for the new writers, but I would also have to move quickly enough that I did not bore the experienced ones. My team also had a variety of backgrounds. Some of the more technical among us take things like relational databases for granted, while others might have no idea what a relational database is, let alone ever work in one. The same holds true for markup language, lifecycle management, and content strategy. While each of these topics has been covered individually in forums like this many times, what I needed to do was to cover all of those topics and more in order to bring the collective group to a common understanding of the global system. You might be asking, why did the authors need to understand so much about how the system works? Why couldn't they just learn to use the Arbortext editor interface and just get right to work? The reason is, as it was a few minutes ago, change, specifically the change in philosophy. In order to accomplish such a significant change in the way authors created content, they needed an understanding that inspired confidence. It was my job, and continues to be, to inspire that confidence. Joseph Campbell, in his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, describes how in every great story, there are always common elements. One of those elements that remains consistent across so many stories is the role of the mentor. The mentor's role is to help guide the hero, as well as provide assistance along the journey. I saw my role as trainer as doing exactly that. The students are the heroes on their quest to gain mastery of a new authoring platform. Let's talk for a few minutes about how I did that. First off, I had to convey a large amount of information, but in a way that suited my audience. One of the biggest differences between traditional desktop publishing and authoring in Arbortext and Windchill is that there are two sides to the system: the authoring and editing application, Arbortext, and the content management system, in our case, Windchill. The authors need to know about both sides and how they work together. Choosing good analogies can go a long way toward connecting new ideas or patterns with the ideas and patterns the writers already know. Some of my trainees had experience with CAD, which operates almost identically to this system. When that wasn't a suitable analogy, I compared the system to an actual library, where a person could go take a book off a shelf, check it out, sit at a desk or a workspace, and when they were finished, return the book to the shelf so it was available for the next person, or check it in. When delivering technical training, I generally take an approach that begins broadly at a high level. Then, in subsequent passes, I repeat the same concepts, but add in more detail. I needed my students to understand the fundamentals, the foundation on which the tools would sit. Once they understood that, we could begin to use the tools to create content. This meant that we started with the basic concepts, in this case, beginning at the first principles of the reductionist philosophy, hierarchies of information, and structural taxonomy. In simple terms, we boiled the information as far down as we could, then determined what it was and how it related to other pieces of information, and then decided how to name it. We then learned about relational databases or libraries, where this content would be stored. Within the database, we learned about how metadata could be used to associate any given piece of content with another, and how multiple pieces of content could be queried or aggregated into a larger collection of those pieces. The next step was to learn about markup language, specifically in the XML syntax, and using DITA tags and architecture. At this point, we had covered most of the background or foundational knowledge. The next step was to put it into practice. Some of my training was done in a one-on-one setting, and others in small groups. In both cases, I let the students choose a topic that they enjoyed and wanted to write about. This ranged from cooking to building things and included my personal favorite, how to wash a car. We broke those ideas down into their fundamental elements, preparing the ingredients or combining components into assemblies or rinsing the soap off the car. The students then wrote each of these topics according to whether they were concepts or tasks. Once the individual pieces were written, we assembled them into a book map and began the process of walking the book and its topics through the states that would be typical of our document's life cycles. We iterated content, revised content, and even translated content, doing our best to mimic what the system would be for real deliverables in our system. In the end, the students had their own reference document for use in the future when writing content on their own. The second thing I needed to accomplish in the training was to demonstrate thorough knowledge of the system. I invited my trainees to ask questions at any time throughout training. This did two things. One, it allowed me to take advantage of their train of thought to provide deeper knowledge while they were curious about it. And two, it built trust because they knew I wasn't simply reading from a script or regurgitating published information. By following the students' train of thought, I was able to foster deeper engagement. Better engagement meant better learning, and thus better outcomes in the future. In many cases, I had students ask questions that helped connect some of the early foundational information to more advanced topics. It helped conversationally extrapolate from simple ideas like tagging to much more complicated ideas like reuse or translation management. By being able to answer questions about the subject matter and system in real time, I began to establish a level of trust that meant the students would feel empowered to ask more complex questions in the future, knowing that they would either get a good answer or that we would start down a path of exploration that helped us both learn more about the system. The third thing I did was to set clear and reasonable expectations. If you've ever worked with Gallup, and I'd encourage it, you will know that expectations and accountability are crucial for high performance. At the very beginning of our training, I shared the complete agenda. I made it clear that the schedule was flexible. We could take as much time for each item as was necessary, but the subject matter was fairly rigid. A stitch in time saves 9, but the needle and thread are indispensable. Each of the students were expected to learn each of the concepts covered in the training, and we could take as long as was necessary to accomplish that. I'd like to summarize at a high level some of the things I think that we did well. The old adage goes, when the student is ready, the master will appear. My best students have been the ones who arrived with a desire to learn. Deep abstract learning happens best when the student is curious and motivated. Manufacturing motivation is difficult and rarely successful. It's extremely rewarding as a trainer to see a curious and motivated student internalize the training and immediately start putting it into practice. Similarly, delivering just-in-time learning works well. Being able to step out of training and into a real-world assignment works far better than when there was a gap between the training and a first real Arbortext assignment. The last thing I'd like to highlight is that I dedicated a significant amount of my time to provide ongoing support to the trainees. It would be silly to think that I could pass on 100% of my knowledge over the course of a few training sessions. So the rational consequence is that I maintain capacity to provide support after the fact. This support could come in either a structured or unstructured form. On the structured end, we could have standing meetings or office hours. Given that our team was on the smaller side and that each person would get into Arbortext projects at different times, we opted for an ad hoc model where they could contact me for help on an as-needed basis. I've spent the last while talking with you about a bunch of things that we did well and what went right. I'm going to transition to talking about a few things that we could have done better, because let's be honest, these things never go quite as well as planned, and there's always room to improve. I recently listened to a couple of presentations about training writers to use DITA. One of the key takeaways was that your system should be documented in its entirety. This could take the form of SOPs or standardized work instructions or whichever document your company uses. Our documentation was not, and full disclosure, still isn't 100% contained in a single document set. We've got a fantastic collection of flowcharts, instructional information, training materials, but they're not completely cohesive. Another great thing to have would be a complete training plan that included knowledge checks and proof of competence along the way. However, the way I delivered my training was largely hands-on inside our live system, which ruled out competence checks prior to the authors working in that live system. I think this proves the point that you don't have to have everything be perfect. Arbortext and Windchill work so well that as long as the foundational knowledge is there, writers can easily learn to use the system. I'm sure there's much more that we could cover, but I want to be mindful of time. So let me close here before moving on to your questions. As a trainer, it was my job to inspire confidence, to communicate effectively with my audience, and to establish and manage expectations. We started the course with a simple philosophy lesson so that we understood things like reductionism, hierarchies, and taxonomy. We talked about what relational databases were and how they would be utilized in the creation and cataloging of content. Then we talked about markup language, beginning with XML, then narrowing to DITA 1.3, then arriving at the even smaller set of tags that were commonly used in our schema. After covering all of that ground, we ventured into authoring. We authored concepts and tasks, then built those topics into book maps. We walked those documents through their life cycle, including iterations, revisions, and translations, all while adding more complexity by including tables, figures, notes, and cross-references. In the end, each trainee walked away with the confidence that they could author content, not just because they'd done it, but because they had learned the why behind so many of the details within the system. They knew how metadata helped catalog topics in Windchill. They knew how topics related to each other and to their parent book maps. And they knew how iterations differed from revisions. As I wrap up my presentation today, I want to thank you for your time and attention, but I also want to challenge you. Don't just tell someone how to get the job done. Inspire them to work from a position of confidence. Be the mentor to their hero. And now, if we have some time for questions, I'm happy to entertain them. From my presenter view, I can see that there are some questions in the Q&A, but I don't see the Q&A on my screen. So maybe one of the other hosts could read off if there are questions.
Yeah, I can read off the questions for you. So got one question from Sandra. Does Stryker use structured content in all their product labels?
I would give that a qualified yes. We use Arbortext and Windchill to create content for our instructions for use. We do not use it for let's say, on-package labeling, but we do use structured content for IFE, so instructions for use or user guides, user manuals, those types of documents.
Okay, thank you. And then we have another question from John. Did you train Japanese writers who have limited English but are SMEs?
I did not. In fact, I believe all of my writers are native English speakers within North America, with one exception in Germany, whose native language was German, but also spoke very good English.
Okay, and we have another question from Rick. Does Stryker use Arbortext Windchill for areas like ECAD, say, writing manuals, etc.? If yes, does Stryker arrange all ECAD items in Windchill, or do you pull ECAD deliverables from other systems into Arbortext Windchill?
I believe the answer is no. We use PTC products for CAD along with others across the different divisions of our company. But for documentation, we are at the moment only using Arbortext with Windchill. We are not integrating CAD as yet. We've done some experimentation in that direction with creating illustrations, but we do not directly integrate CAD into our Arbortext documentation.
Okay. So that's a repeat. Does anybody else have a question? So that's all the open questions we have. I'll give you a minute to enter a question into the Q&A if you have one. Otherwise, we can move on. Okay, I don't see any new questions. So thank you, Eric. Chris, are you ready? So
yep, I'm ready.
From 11 to 11:45, we have a presentation from Chris at Eaton. You want to share your screen?
Yep. All right, everybody see my screen okay?
I do not see your screen.
Not yet.
All right, how about now?
Yep, now I can see it.
That's better.
All right, cool. Okay, hey everybody. What I'm going to be talking about today is DITA in general, and then I'll be doing a deep dive into the various features that Arbortext Editor has to support DITA. That's referred to as the DITA application. So I'll be covering that in some detail. So first, I want to give a little bit of an overview of the company that I'm working for. Eaton was founded in 1911 by Joseph Eaton, who developed the first gear-driven truck axle. The company has obviously grown since then and now has 4 primary sectors. I won't go through them there, but you can see them. I work in the electrical sector, in particular in the power quality division of the electrical sector, where we do user manuals and service manuals for uninterruptible power supply systems. Eaton currently has over 92,000 employees in 175 countries, and the primary focus of the company at this point is on energy efficient power management products and services. So a little bit about my background. I've been working with Arbortext Editor since 1996. Well, this was before Arbortext Editor was available on the Windows platforms. We were using Unix workstations back then. For people who have been around a while working with Editor, I attended most of the AUGI conferences. I presented at them twice. And after working for a customer for a while, I went to work for Arbortext and eventually PTC for the next 14 years. So I've got a very long background with DITA. I was actually aware of DITA while it was still under development at IBM and attended presentations at IBM while they were still developing the standard. I also wrote the Arbortext Editor DITA application help, and I developed the DITA DTT specialization that the PTC documentation department uses for its documentation. I was also the PTC rep on the OASIS DITA and DITA adoption technical committees for several years. So I've been involved with DITA a long time. So what is DITA? DITA is an XML standard that provides a set of document types, both DTDs and schemas, that contain a tag set for topic-based authoring. IBM originally developed the standard, and it was introduced by them in 2001. They donated it to the OASIS Standards Organization in 2004. Now, OASIS, the Organization for the Advancement of Structured Information Standards, it develops and maintains many business-related standards. OASIS has a lot of committees that they do for standards development. So the DITA committee is one of those, and they also have a DITA adoption technical committee that basically markets and provides documentation for DITA. And for people that are interested in the work of the committee, the entire DITA 1.3 specification is in the Arbortext Editor Help Center, so you can dive into it as much as you want. So the technical committee was originally founded in 2004. The first revision of DITA 1.0 was approved in 2005, and the current version is DITA 1.3, which was approved in 2015. I actually did a little bit of work on the 1.3 standard, so I had a small hand in that standard. Now, in addition to providing DITA, IBM also developed the DITA Open Toolkit, referred to as our acronyms are the DITA OT. That's an open source publishing engine for DITA content. A lot of the vendors that support DITA, they use the DITA OT. Arbortext, of course, has its own publishing engine that they use for publishing. So the DITA OT is maintained by SourceForge as opposed to OASIS. So for those of you already familiar with DITA, I'll talk a little bit about the next DITA release that is upcoming. Actually going to be a pretty big change to DITA. So DITA 2.0 is currently under development. A huge change here is that DITA 2.0 is not backwards compatible with earlier releases. That's because they're really taking the opportunity to dive into the standard and remove all sorts of tags and content and features that are either not being used, that they had previously deprecated in another release, that they were reserving for future use, to determine that they don't need to use it after all, that they put in by mistake, that are duplicates. So anything that they think doesn't need to be in the standard at this point, they're trimming out and making the standard, have less content in it. Another big change is they're no longer going to support XML schemas in DITA 2.0. The committee just doesn't have the personnel at this point to provide both DTD and schema files. So as of DITA 2.0, you'll no longer be able to get XML schemas. They're removing the learning and training specialization, and for anybody that uses the machine task stuff, they're also removing the machine task stuff because, again, the committee doesn't have enough personnel to maintain those things. So they're going to be moving the learning and training stuff to a GitHub repository. It'll still be available, but it will no longer be an official part of the standard. So just a few changes, couple of changes that I found interesting that are upcoming that people might need to be aware of. They are adding multimedia elements to DITA 2.0 for both audio and video. So instead of having to use the object tag, you'll be able to have specific elements that are for those types of multimedia output. They're also enhancing simple tables a little bit to add a title, and allow you to span rows and columns. Previous to simple tables didn't have a lot of capability to them. So there are lots of other changes and enhancements. If you're interested, I've got the a link to the proposal down here in the notes. So feel free to, again, just as diving into 1.3 standard, you can also dive into the 2.0 proposals and get a lot more detail in what they're doing. So I want to give a little just general background on DITA and what it is and what's involved in it. So obviously, again, DITA is an acronym. It's the Darwin Information Typing Architecture. Darwin, because the standard can evolve to meet the needs of an organization. Information typing, because it's a topic-based authoring system and it's based on the type of information that is being delivered in the content. And an architecture, because it provides a complete structure for authoring. It allows you to develop, process, reuse information. They provide everything that you need to use the standard and implement DITA in your organization. So a little bit more detail about each of those. So the base components of DITA can be evolved to meet an organization's information needs. This is called specialization. Specialization is based on a tag, and you can specialize virtually any tag that's available in the DITA standard. You can specialize it from a topic all the way down to a paragraph. So components can have several generations. Like you can start with a topic and you can basically evolve that to be a concept. And if you want to specialize concept, you can take the concept, you can evolve that to be a concept for whatever need your organization has. So you can specialize pretty much endlessly from the base components. So inside of the DTDs, the evolution of a specialization is captured. So you always know what it evolved from and what the evolution path was. And the really nice thing about that is specialized components can fall back to their base type for styling and processing. So if you have like a specialized paragraph, you don't have to modify your style sheet to handle that paragraph, specialized paragraph, if you don't want to. It'll just fall back to the styling for the default paragraph and you won't have to do anything else. So information typing, everything is based on the type of information. DITA has 3 different editions in the 1.3 edition. They have the base edition, which has the very base components, which is just the topic and the map. And then they have the technical content edition, which is an evolution of those base components. Anyway, each of the editions includes the previous edition. So they've taken the topic in the technical content edition and they've evolved it to become a set of specialized topics based on the information that you're providing, concept, task, reference, etc. They've taken map and they've evolved it for book map, which includes like the front matter and the back matter and index and all the things that you need to produce a printed book or a PDF. And then finally, you have the all-inclusive edition, which has all of this stuff, plus it throws in additional things like the learning and training content and a lot more esoteric components. I'm not going into full detail about what's there because there's a lot. If you're interested, you can refer to the 1.3 standard and it'll give you full details on what all is in there. So in addition to the base releases, DITA editions also contain domains. What domains are is they're a set of tags that are developed for a specific purpose, basically like a plug and play tag set that you can either include in your DITA implementation or not include in your DITA implementation. A lot of ones that people tend to do are like the highlighting domain that contains all of the tagging for bold, italic, underline, and things of that nature. And again, I won't go into any real detail about all the different domains, but there are several different domains that you can plug in. Like if you have equations that you need, then you can plug equations in. If you want to use MathML, which is the XML standard for math-related tagging, you can plug that tag set in. So that really gives you a lot of capability to modify your implementation to exactly meet what the needs of your organization are. And you can also develop new domains. I developed a domain for PTC that included all the specialized tags that we made for PTC in that domain. So I could just plug that into the base. So the architecture, besides the document types, again, DITA provides a complete framework for topic-based authoring, for configuring. It gives all sorts of details about processing. I've already mentioned specializations. You can constraints. Constraints are where you can take the tag set and you can remove some of the tags from the tag set. Set up a constraint that's saying, I just want to use these tags that are available in the topic. I don't want to use these other tags. So for addressing, which is basically referencing for linking and setting up references and stuff like that, it has a really robust reuse component to it. So a little bit more about the architecture. There are 2 main components. The topic is the base unit for authoring and reuse. So, they have the same basic structure. They have a title, they have a body. And I'm sure most people here know about topic-based authoring, but the topic is intended to be able to stand alone as an information unit. Somebody should be able to read your topic and learn everything they need to know about that topic without having to refer to any other topic in your document. That's the ideal. So the topic types should reflect the information covered. That's why I made all the different types of topics. Like if you're presenting conceptual information there, you use a concept. If you're presenting procedural information, you would use a task. So basically you develop this whole set of topics that contain the information that you need to present to your users. So then you use the map to organize the topics into a structured collection of information. A map usually corresponds to a deliverable, like a help system or a PDF or something of that nature. So the map provides the hierarchy. The map specifies the relationships between the topics. And you can reference other maps. So you can have a main map that then references all these other individual maps. And that's often how people organize the work in DITA. They'll have a main map for the entire group, and then each of the authors will have their own individual submap that they build out their information in, and then that gets plugged back into the main map. Now, maps don't have to reference DITA resources. They can reference other things. They can reference web pages. They can reference other files like video files, audio files, text files, and that nature. And again, the specialized book map contains front and back matter for books. So you can basically have everything that you need to create a printed book out of DITA using the book map. So now I want to go a deep dive into the Arbortext Editor DITA application. Now, Editor has many features and interfaces that are only used with DITA documents. It is a very robust set of features that provide a really good environment for DITA authoring. So both the topic and map have customized editing environments, and I'll be providing details about the features that are available in each of those. So starting with editing topics, the primary tool for editing topics is the Resource Manager. You can open and close the Resource Manager either from the View menu, or it is a toolbar button you can click to open it and close it. It also has a little X on the corner to close it if you want to do that. You can either have the Resource Manager docked to your editor window, or you can pull it loose and have it as a free-floating thing off to the side, so you can just have it sitting there. The Resource Manager has many different features, which I'm going to cover each one. I'm not going to go through the list here, but anyway, it has many different features, so let's just dive right on into them. So the primary thing it has is reference tabs. For the topics, the Reference Manager has 3 different tabs. It has a tab for setting up links and cross-references. It has a tab for referencing graphics files, and it has a tab for referencing content references, which is a specific DITA concept that I'll cover in a minute. Now, these tabs are not just available inside of the base editor window, but if you're modifying a reference attribute for a DITA topic or some sort of DITA link or something, that'll also produce a free-floating version of the Resource Manager, Georgia, that'll let you to modify that reference attribute. So by default, the tabs will show the same location. So if you switch between the different tabs, they'll show the same location in the browser, but you can turn that off. The interface, as with most Arbortext products, is very flexible and lets you set up your environment pretty much how you like it. So a little about the link extracts tab. Basically, this is how you create links. It lets you locate and create links to other documents or document elements. It supports both internal and external links, and it supports links to web pages. I'll show that interface in the next slide. Now, the primary thing about these, and I got these on each of the slides actually for the DITA tabs, is what the Resource Manager does for you is it ensures that your DITA markup is correct. DITA markup can be a little bit complicated, if it's based on the standard and you do it based on the standard. So the Resource Manager takes all of that, knowledge. You don't have to have all of that knowledge to create a link. If you use your Resource Manager to create a link, then it'll stick the DITA markup in there exactly how it needs to be, and you don't have to worry about it outside of that. So this is the link href tab if you're like referencing another element inside of your document, or if you're referencing like another document or something. If you want to reference like a web page, then you can click on the toolbar button I'll cover in a minute, and that'll open this version of the link href tab where you can either just type in a URL and insert that in your document, or if you want to browse to a web page, you can has a couple of buttons here to open your default browser and browse to where you want to be. And then should you have your active browser up there on the web page that you want, you can click this other button and that'll grab the URL that's currently in your active browser and stick that in as a link in your document. So the next tab available for topics is the image tab. It again enables you to locate and to create references to images. As DITA, you don't insert in XML in general, everything's a reference. You have to have your graphic files available and you have to reference from your XML. So the image tab helps you do that. It supports both local and external images, and a nice feature that was added is it provides a preview of the selected image. So once you browse down in the browser and you clicked on the image that you think you want to include, it'll stick a little preview up here in this preview pane, and that'll make sure that you can know that's exactly the image that you want to include. And again, it ensures that the correct DITA markup is used. So the content reference tab. Content reference is a concept specific to DITA. It's one of the main components of reuse in DITA. Basically, you can reuse any tag in DITA, from a paragraph down to just, basically any tag in DITA can be reused as a content reference. So this allows you to reuse things. Like, for example, if you have a set of safety notes, say, that you want to reuse in all of your documents, you only have to create them once, and you can have them in a standalone document. Then all of your other documents can reference those notes and make sure that they're all being used in exactly the same way with exactly the same content in all of your documents. The way this is often used is for product names or names of other books. That's how we used them at PTC. Like, all of our products were in a standalone file with a list of them, and they were all referenced as a content reference, and same for all the names of our manuals. So the nice thing about it is, since your content is only included in one location, then if you modify that content in that one location, then that change ripples through all of your other documents through the content reference. So that is real convenience for storing things that you need to reuse. You only have to change it in one place, and then once you change it in that one place, then the next time you publish, the latest version of that is grabbed and put in your deliverable. So the content reference tab lets you drill down, as with images or links, and find the content you want to reuse, and then again insert it with the correct DITA markup into your document. So moving outside the tabs, we're looking at some of the other features in the resource manager. The look-in drop-down is one of the big things. It lets you select the location you want to display in the browser. Should you have drilled down into a file system or a CMS system, it'll show the path that you drilled down to, so you can jump back up in that path if you need to. It also contains a couple of other features. It contains your favorite locations, which I'll discuss in a bit, and it contains your browse history, which I'll also discuss in a bit. So it gives you, basically with the drop down, you can jump directly to, where you need to be to find your reference. So the resource browser is where you find the references. So it lets you browse down to the resource that you want to reference. You can either, open the hierarchy progressively by clicking on the little pluses and minuses in the hierarchy, or you can just double click on something in the hierarchy and it will drill on down with the double click. And the browser also contains your favorite locations and contains your history. And it usually has a default set of content, which includes like your CMS, the current document, again, favorite locations and history, things of that nature. Now, the browser has a filter feature, which comes in really nice. Often if you get down to where all your topics are stored, you may have a whole lot of them there in the list and you don't want to pick through them. So you can type in the little filter that's at the top of the browser there, and it will dynamically filter as you type. So I've got an example over here. When I first opened up this set of topics, it was like many topics, but then as you type in battery, it only displays things that have battery in the title. So that's a really helpful feature. Helps you find and locate things pretty quickly. And it does turn the browser yellow when it's active, so you know that the filter is active, and you can remove the content from the filter if you no longer want to have it filtered. Now, the resource manager has a lot of toolbar buttons. It has a menu button, and there's all the different menu choices there. The menu choices that are available change based on what you're doing, which tab is open, and things of that nature. But in general, these are the choices that would be available. This is where, for example, you would turn off synchronization of your tab locations if you didn't want it. You could clear your history. You could do CMS operations. You can manage your favorites and all that nature. So the menu is also available as a right-click menu inside the browser. So you don't have to click the menu button. You can just right-click and you'll get the same menu choices there. And then it has some other convenient buttons, one to move you to the previous folder, one to move you up a level in the hierarchy, one to refresh the view in the browser in case you didn't see what you wanted in there, or you didn't have an ID set on something that you want to reference, and you go and set the ID. Then you can refresh your browser view and it'll show that element with an ID now. It has the browse the web button that I discussed a little bit. That little document with a star is your current document. If you want to make a reference down into the document that you currently have open, you can click on that and that'll show in the browser. Then if you have a CMS, you can bring up your CMS object browser, or you can search the CMS from within the resource manager. There's one additional button that's available on the image tab, which lets you go to the current document folder. So if you have already browsed down to where your images are, then you can just click on that toolbar button. It'll open all the images in your current folder inside of the browser. The menu can have some additional choices I'm not covering here. If you have intelligent graphics, like they can display in 3D and contain animations and sequences of that nature. You can create specialized linking to those documents. It can do things like highlight something inside of the 3D graphic, that can produce a view of the 3D graphic, that can set off an animation or sequence inside your 3D graphic. So you can basically create intelligent linking too if you're using those sort of graphics. So a little bit about the insert controls on the bottom. This is where you basically determine what you want to insert into the document and what you want to show in the browser. They generally have these three main ones: type, which filters the browser list based on the document type that you want to see. Then show, which filters the browser list based on the type of element that's inside of that document. So you can either show elements with IDs, you can show all elements and things of that nature. Then you can have what side of tag you want to insert. If you can insert more than one type of tag, then you can use the insert drop down to determine which tag that you want to insert. So the insert button down here at the bottom is only active for valid insertions, so it won't let you insert something if you're not in a valid location. So that's really nice. Now, like I say, this again, some of these things might not be available depending on the tab you're in. For example, the show tab is not available in the image. The show control is not available in the image tab. And the key ref control I'm going to talk about later. I mean, I'll cover that toward the end of the presentation. I'm not going to be talking about the key reference features very much in this presentation. So a little bit about the Resource Manager favorites. It lets you bookmark locations that you can jump right to on either the file system or inside your CMS. My favorite locations I put here are inside of our CMS, so I can jump right to the top level of the hierarchy for each of the products that I support. The nice thing about your favorites is they're saved across sessions, and there are several menu choices that are available for the favorites. You can add to favorites, remove from favorites, move things up and down, and a nice feature is you can export and import your favorites. So for example, if somebody in your group has set up a really nice set of favorites that you want to share amongst everybody in the group, and they can use this export favorites menu choice to export that as an XML file, and then everybody else can import those favorites into their resource manager, and they'll have them available for their use. Resource Manager also has a history. I think I mentioned a little bit more about the favorites. Your favorites persist across sessions, so your favorites will always be there. You also have a history that for your current session shows all the locations that you've opened. So this only applies to the current session. Once you close out of editor and close that session, then that'll clear your history out. Should you be in the middle of a session and you've got just too much stuff in your history, you want to clear it out, there is a menu choice available to clear the history for you. Now, moving on from the resource manager, I want to talk about some of the other features that are available for editing topics. One of the nice things is a preview link text. So when you insert a link into your document, editor will go and find the title of your target. Like if you're inserting a link to another topic, it'll find the title for that topic, and it'll bring this in as the preview link text where it's gray and has the little diamond next to it. Now, this means that you will always be using the current title of the topic if you use the preview link text. So, if the title that's in your reference changes, then editor will still, if you have the preview link text using that in your document, it'll find the latest version of the topic and put it in here. Now, if you don't like the preview link text, you can turn it off with a preference. I'll show that preference later. If you also want to use authored link text, you can just click on the preview text to select it and then just start typing, and you can replace it with authored link text. Now, a nice thing about the not just a preview link text, but also a link in general is you can basically use this for link checking. If you have a link with a preview link text or other link in your document, you can double click on that link and it'll traverse the link. It'll find, for example, the topic that you're referencing and open that up in another editor window. So that's a good thing to use for like checking your links and stuff. We have to do our links just so here with our CMS, and sometimes you can link to the wrong object. So if you double click on a link and it doesn't open, then you know you have a broken link. So there is a right-click menu choice that can toggle between the two. And the thing about the the preview link text is sometimes it can get out of date. If you have changed the title, on your reference topic, then your old title will still show in the preview link text, even though the current title will show in your published output. So I'll be talking about some things, useful things for checking your documents later, but you can use the update references or update selected references features to refresh the preview link text and make sure that it's up to the current thing. So about the preview link text, there's a little bit of an issue in the editor window about selecting an XREF that contained a preview link text. So just a tip for that, if you put your cursor inside of the preview link text and do right click and do select element, then that's an easy way to select the XREF without having to do some other machinations inside your window to try and select it. So editor has two different features for DITA documents for document checking. The regular check completeness feature lets you validate it against a document type as usual, but it also performs enhanced checking for DITA documents. Again, the DITA standard is pretty picky, and it wants you to have your markup in there just so. So Arbortext has built several different enhanced checking features inside of check completeness to go and check for various types of DITA stuff that the standard wants you to have there, and sometimes you don't have. So if you run a completeness check, I got the example here. It says it wants you to have an XML lang attribute on the root element. It wasn't here in that. It'll give you a warning. You don't have to have it, but it will. So the other thing is the tools menu also contains the update references that I mentioned just before. That will go and check and validate all the attributes on the DITA references tags in your open document. It'll traverse the links. It'll make sure that they're still valid. If they're not valid, it will actually update the markup in your document to make it valid, without you having to do anything. It'll again update the preview link text. So if you look down at the bottom of your editor window to the left, there's the message text area, and that'll show the status of both the enhanced completeness check and the update references. So sometimes they'll open, if it does find issues, it'll open a window that'll show you the issues that it's found in the check. And just in general, it's just a good practice to run update references on your DITA documents periodically, just to make sure that all those references are clean and that things will go to the resources as you would expect. So DITA has its own set of preferences, and the preferences dialog has the DITA category here. So the DITA reference path is also included in the file location. So just a little bit about the DITA reference path. The DITA reference path is very similar to the graphics path, if you're familiar with the graphics path. This basically enables you to set a list of directories that editors should search for a reference. So this is a real convenience for you if you have some standard locations that you use, like in your CMS or your Git stuff on your file system or something. So this keeps you from having to put the full path to the reference inside your document. Now, as long as what you're trying to reference is inside your reference path, one of the directories there, that all you'll have to put in is the file name. You don't have to put any other stuff in for your for your link or your image tab or anything like that. So this enables you to use relative paths in your references, which can be a real convenience. So there are additional advanced preferences if you want to check those out. Again, as I say, you can modify how DITA is done pretty granularly on your system using like the advanced preferences and things of that nature. But just a couple of important preferences are on here. The insert preview link text up at the top there under DITA Resource Manager. If you don't want to have preview link text ever, then you can check that checkbox and turn it off. And also, I had mentioned before, the key reference user interface. Editor has a lot of UI that is included in things for key references. And if you don't use key references, then that can really clutter up your screen. So you can click this Show Key Reference User Interface checkbox, and that will remove all that UI stuff from your editor window and all of the other dialog boxes and stuff, so you don't have to see them. Since we don't use key references here, I turn that off. It just makes it a cleaner look for your window. So there's also automatic ID generation for topics. Anytime that you create a new topic, then there is a feature built into the outermost element that'll assign an ID to that topic for you when you save your new topic. The ID is stored in the ID attribute, as for all the DITA tags. So editor will create a unique ID that's based on the current text in the tag and the current date and time. So DITA requires unique IDs for any topic or any tag that is referenced. It has to have a unique ID within your set of DITA content. So if you don't want to come up with an ID scheme, to making sure that yourself for your organization, then editor will create the unique IDs for you. There's a couple of features that'll generate an ID for you outside of that. The tools menu has a tools generate ID for wherever your cursor is, whatever tag it's in. You can do tools generate ID. It'll assign a unique ID to that element. And there's also that little lightning bolt ID toolbar button that'll do the same thing. Like if you're modifying an attribute for one of your DITA content, then the ID, that toolbar button is also available there. So you can get a unique ID there. And I already mentioned that an ID is automatically assigned to a new topic when it's first saved. So now I want to go into editing maps a little bit. Editor has a really customized interface for DITA map editing. Now, the thing about DITA maps is they contain very little content. And basically, the only content that you're going to have in your DITA map is the title. Everything else is tags and references. So you don't really need a standard editor window to do your map editing. So there's so Arbortext created this editing environment for maps. There's some resource manager tabs specifically for maps. It also provides an outline to build your hierarchy and provides a spreadsheet-like interface for attribute management, because again, attributes are really important in the DITA content. So it provides you a way to not only see your references, but also manage your attribute content. And then there's a toolbar for moving topic references around. So talk about the outline a little bit. This is where you build your map. This is where you set up your hierarchy. It has its little cursor here, which shows your current insertion point. You can drag and drop inside the outline. So you can grab a piece of content, move it around, and drop it where you want it to be. If you don't want to drag and drop, then you can use the toolbar for that. You just have to select a piece of content, then you can use the toolbar to move things up and down or increase and decrease the level in the hierarchy where that reference is there. So You can select a reference by clicking on the icon. If it has child elements like this Tech Info Meta example here, you can double click on the icon for that, and that'll select everything inside of that hierarchy. So you can move the whole thing around as one piece of content. Now, if you want to, for example, edit the title here, you can select the title element, do a Control plus click on the reference, and that will open up a editor view at the bottom of the screen that you can go in and type like usual to provide content for that element. Now, if you are referencing another topic, you can double click not on the icon, but on the name of it, and that'll open that topic in editor in a separate window. And if you don't want to use the resource manager, you just want to drop content in, you can actually drag and drop from Windows File Explorer into the outline. You can grab a piece of content in File Explorer, drag it into the outline and drop it, and it'll be put in with all the correct markup and that stuff. So column view is the next big piece of editing maps. So this allows you to view and modify the attributes like I said. So you can collapse the columns. Let me show you that. Actually, if you click on this little piece here, that'll collapse the columns, and all you'll see is the outline. So if you don't want to see the columns, you don't have to. There's also a right-click menu at the top of the column that'll hide it for you. So you can collapse columns and display that. There's a special first column in there that shows the attributes that you currently have set, and if you click on it, that'll open the modify attributes dialog. And you can also modify attributes inside the actual columns themselves. If you double click on a cell in one of the columns, then you can go and change the content for that attribute inside of the cell. Now, across the top is the name of the attributes. It goes down and it shows you for each individual piece in the outline, you know, what they're set at. So you can show whatever attributes you want in column view. The preferences dialog also has a columns category that you can use to go in and configure the columns that display in column view. So talk about the resource manager. I'm just going to talk about two of the tabs. I'm not going to talk about the key reference tab. So the topic tab, this is where you insert topic references into your map. You know, everything's a topic reference inside of a map. So you can drill down just like with link or XREF content or things of that nature and insert something into the outline. You can insert a single reference, or if you have a folder that you can use, you can select that folder and it'll insert references to all the topics inside that folder. And the nice thing about that is if you have a hierarchy of subfolders inside that folder, it'll retain that hierarchy in the outline and have references to all the different elements and give you different levels in the outline for your subfolders. It also has a mode for entering references to a web page. It's very similar to the XREF tab, so I'm not going to show that. And again, it allows you to ensure the correct DITA markup is used. Now, the next tab for maps is the new topic tab. This lets you create a new DITA topic right inside the resource manager, assign it to a folder, set the title, and then create it. So you can either create an empty topic based on a template, or you can assign a sample topic that you want to have always used when somebody's creating a topic of a particular type. Now, you do have to configure this in the DCF file, so it's not something that works out of the box, but it can come in really handy when you're building out your map. And again, correct DITA markup. So another thing that you can include in a map is a relationship table. Relationship tables define relationships between topics for see and see also references. So and when you publish, then like at the bottom of your content, there'll be a little category for like see or see also, and the relationships you've established inside the relationship table will show up down there in your published content. Now, this is always inserted at the end of the map, so you have to be down at the very bottom of the map to insert a resource, to use the insert resource table menu choice. But you know, just as an aside, Relationship tables can be complicated and they're often kind of hard to set up. So a lot of people don't use them, for that reason. So moving outside of maps, I want to cover a couple of additional features and then I'll be done. So as I mentioned, there's an entire interface for keys and key references that's available in the editor. And that could, frankly, you could do an entire presentation on keys and key references and all of the UI associated with that. So DITA keys are, again, a way to reuse content, but instead of using a direct link to the content, like in a content reference, you use an indirect referencing mechanism for your content reuse. What you do is the content is assigned a key. So that would be like in the whatever content you're reusing, it would have a key assigned to it. And then the references are made to the key instead of to the specific content. So keys are resolved at the map level. And like for example, the sample they use for in the DITA specialization is if you have a task for changing a printer ink cartridge that's generic, but you need a different image for each of the various models, then you could put a key on each of the images. And then in the map, you would just assign the key that you need for that image to show up in the publication for that particular printer ink cartridge. So there's a lot of UI I've already mentioned for around support for keys, and you can hide that if you don't want to see it. See, the last thing I'm going to touch on is DITA files. Now, DITA also has DITA files for conditional processing based on attribute values. Editor obviously has its own profiling feature that you can use to include and exclude content, but that is proprietary to Arbortext. So if you want to use something more standard, then you can use a DITA file. Now, Editor provides the DITA editor where you can set all this stuff up for what you want to do. For your conditional processing, you can either include content, you can exclude content, and you can flag content in various ways. You can do highlighting, bold, underline, italic. You can change the color or have a different background. Or if you want some graphic to appear before or after that content, then you can set that stuff up. So it's actually pretty flexible environment for doing conditional processing. And Editor does have this DITA editor, which enables you to set up a DITA file should you choose to use that part of the standard. So that's what I had to cover today. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, so it looks like most questions were actually answered as you were presenting, but we do have two left in the Q&A section. When is the expected release of DITA 2.0? I did some searching and I could not find a date. Does any of the panelists have a date for that?
No, they don't have a date yet. It's still under development. These things tend to take years. And once the committee actually finishes what they think they're done, then it has to go through this entire process where various companies and people associated with OASIS and the committee actually have to vet what they've done and sign off on it. So they don't tend to put a specific date. They could probably throw a date out there for you, but at this point, they're getting pretty far along in the development, it looks like. I pulled my content from a presentation I saw at an Adobe conference earlier this year where Chris Eberlein, who's the person who runs the DITA technical committee, she was covering what they were doing. So it looks they're pretty far along, but I wouldn't expect it for at least another year or two.
Okay, thank you. And then there's another one, but I'm guessing it was a follow-on to another question. It says to clarify, how is it shipped? I'm trying to find the original question. I'm guessing it goes with this one. You mentioned maps in map. Can you elaborate a bit on that and how it can be used?
Oh, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. So the question is from anonymous attendee. Can you elaborate on your question? I only have the second half here, so if you can elaborate on that, we can try to answer that. Otherwise, is there any other questions for Chris?
Paul, I think too, though, that on that Eric had said a little bit there. I think maybe the question is around maps and if maps can kind of be combined together.
Yes, maps can be combined together.
Oh yeah, for sure.
At any level.
At any level, right? Yep.
Okay, so for this one, should I?
Yeah, I'll just move it answered live and we'll call it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And if there's more questions, feel free. We're monitoring it as much as we can and trying to answer it. There's been a lot of input, and for those that haven't looked at the question and answered, there's about 17 in the dialogue. There are a lot of good content there. So feel free to get in and look at that as we're going here. So.
Okay. Excuse me. So we're running about 50 minutes fast, but we'll keep going here. So we have another presentation from customer Steve. Steve, are you ready?
Hey, good morning. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, if you want to share your screen.
How's that?
Okay, I can see it.
All right, cool. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Steve Stoner with Panasonic Avionics. And it didn't work. Hang on a minute. There we go. Steve Stoner with Panasonic Avionics. I work in Lake Forest, California. I'm a senior manager. I've been in Panasonic for 24 years. Prior to that, I worked for Hughes Aircraft for a bunch of years in the missile defense systems. Primarily, I run 3 departments. I run a small engineering group. I work directly with our repair center, which I'll get into in a minute. And then I do the technical publications group, which I took over in 2019. Just to edify, inside Panasonic Avionics, there's several business units. I report into the technical services business unit, which handles various line maintenance and repair for our products on aircraft. In-flight entertainment connectivity is the technical term. Panasonic Avionics has been around for a few years, and we're a leading supplier of IFE solutions on aircraft. There's a small picture there. Basically, the screens on the back of the seats is one of the products. From a business unit standpoint, we have over 50 line stations currently at various airports for our customer base. We also have 6 regional repair centers in the United States, Europe, Middle East, Asia, providing full regulatory repair of the product, IFE products for Panasonic. Okay, so getting into the fun stuff. So when I took over the Tech Pubs group mid-2019, the primary product that we produce in this group is service bulletins. So my backlog was 190 service bulletin requests. In other words, they were just sitting around waiting to be written. Our average turn time was 45 days per document. Our input was about 20 to 25 per month, and our output was very low compared to the input, between 12 and 16 per month. So in other words, the backlog kept growing. We authored in MS Word, and we also used Adobe FrameMaker. Basically, each service bulletin was a rewrite. We took, a sample from our base and rewrote it, created a new service bulletin, and we averaged about 2.5 days per request. And basically, we aged about a 9-month-old backlog at any one time when I first joined the group. So a little bit about what we have already in place here. We already had Windchill as our repository. We already had Creo and for our CAD designs. I was introduced to by PTC and suggested that I attend the user conference in last January, which I did. I was introduced to Oberon, who presented a full solution to bring Arbortext into Windchill. Through the user conference, attended user sessions, met with experienced users, talked it up a little bit. One of the sessions I attended was from Single Source Solutions about Arbortext for authoring, getting started with Arbortext Editor. And good presentation and conversation piqued my interest in Arbortext Editor. I knew that they could help me achieve my goals, and I pursued them after the meeting, after the conference. But I also knew that I couldn't do it on my own. In talking with Oberon Technologies, they are a partner with PTC, and they helped me use the Arbortext. Let me back up a little bit. I didn't know anything about Arbortext and how it worked, XML or non-XML authoring. And working with Arbortext or Oberon, I learned that Windchill was going to be the center point, and as a standalone context for our full regulatory repository solutions, which included peer review and XML file bursting, etc. Single source solutions, I followed up with Liz and Janice at Single Source. I think a lot of you know them. Discuss repeatable processes for authoring, styling, and publishing content. And we extended that into the actual content training, which DTD to use for our end product. Had no clue. What is XML? Didn't really know what XML was. From my software days, I knew what XML is, but not what it was in regards to authoring. Style, Panasonic had no style guide. Authoring Arbortext Editor, all aspects we needed to learn. Arbortext Styler, how to build a robust style sheet. Not knowing where I needed to start, but I had to pull people into to help me to achieve my goals last year, and that included Oberon and Single Source Solutions. Using the Arbortext default style sheet, we created our own style sheet using DocBook. Here is a sample of our front cover page of a service bulletin. We learned regional creation on cover page and subsequent pages. The cover page here has 5 regions, only region 3 changes with each document. The others are fixed. And our common on following pages. Oberon worked with PAC admin and IT to set up Arbortext as content within Windchill, excuse me. Full connectivity between Arbortext and Windchill. Bursting. Never knew what bursting was until they came along and put it into the system and showed me. Included file name, folder creation, graphic subfolder within Windchill. Full workspace features and added peer review workflow in the new context. Actually works pretty damn good. Now that Arbortext Windchill connection was in place, we had to learn what structured content was. Single sourcing solutions came to the rescue. The team worked directly with Liz Fraley and Janice Summers in the summer months of last year. We had no structured authoring knowledge. We had no idea which architecture to use. Other factors we had to consider and put in place included understanding our output format. What did we want? Had to meet the Air Transportation Association or ATA ISPEC requirements for regulatory agencies. We had to meet, obviously, Panasonic quality system documentation. We had to create a more modern document instead of the formatting from 2003. No style guide, had to understand style and create the guide from scratch. So 8 months later, PTS Technical Publications, we have transformed to a structured content authoring, full XML service bulletin production. We designed our own style sheet. We have master service bulletin templates, repository revision control, bursting XML into Windchill, master style guide now, and we meet the ATA requirements. ATA governs all aircraft engineering and maintenance specifications, and service bulletins are a major part of that in the airline industry. So this is a quick summary. In the pre-Arbortext column there, we were greater than 190 documents in our backlog. We had 45-day turn. We had a 25 per month requests coming in, and we only had about 16 output going out the door per month, which is 2.5 days worth of per document that we had to write. Arbortext came to our rescue. We now have less than 15 documents in our backlog. Our average turn time is 4 days from a backlog standpoint. We still maintain a 20 per month input from a request standpoint, and our average output has basically doubled, 25 to 30 per month. I think, side note here, I think what we learned last year, it was using Arbortext and converting from Microsoft Word and FrameMaker. We've really grown quite a bit as a group. We have 2 good authors in the group right now. But what's neat is going forward, we're already looking to expand into our equipment maintenance manuals, our component maintenance manuals. These are currently outsourced right now, but future plans could bring those in. We're currently planning to expand into EPUBs in 2022 for our line maintenance teams. This will provide good opportunity for the maintenance technicians that are online to pull up the HTML type format on their iPads. And for those that don't know, you have to have technical content in front of you when you do any kind of repair, whether it be on an aircraft or a product that's from an airplane. The content tech data has to be there while you do the work. It can't be muscle memory or anything like that. We're expanding our Arbortext success into other departments within Panasonic. And we're even looking at the VR for training and maintenance. We're very excited for all the possibilities, and it's all owned, all because of the PTC product line and because of Arbortext, Windchill, and Creo. That's pretty much my presentation. I know I went kind of fast, but if you have anything for me, that would be good.
So if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A section. I don't see any questions. Oh, one just came up. What would you say increased your productivity the most? Reuse?
Reuse is a good one. We have our master template that's been vetted, and we can produce a new document from that template within a matter of, say, 4 hours, if not sooner. And it's, from 2.5 days to less than a day. That just automatically increases your output.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, Steve. This is Eric. I noticed that one of our previous questions during the previous presentation was around converting to DITA. And I gave a sort of a short answer in the Q&A, but maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience through that whole process. And, I know you mentioned that you work with single sourcing solutions and some others. So maybe you can elaborate on that for the person that asked that question.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. It was not, I don't think it was hard to learn. I think it was reprogramming our brains to go from using the content that's in Word, everything's paragraphed and spaced and everything. We had to basically throw all that away and relearn how to author in XML. We chose DocBook versus DITA simply because of the type of documents that we were using. And I think it was the right choice at the time and I continue doing that with using DocBook. I am exploring a little bit into DITA, but down the road, we'll probably jump into DITA for other documents that we have mainly because of the content mapping and stuff like that. Hope that answers the question.
There's another one in the queue now as well.
Yeah,
Yep. So I was just gonna. So how did you train your team on the new tools and structured authoring approach?
Well, fortunately, the authors I had when we went through this already had some background in XML authoring. They basically taught me some of this stuff, believe it or not. And but what we did was we went through each day. It was a couple months training with single sourcing solutions. And each day we met at a certain time and went through it. Structured program. We had homework. The ladies there gave us homework every night. We went through it. And then on the side, I met with my team and we went over that homework prior to having our next meeting with our trainers. And we basically formulated everything that we had to do. You have to take into account that we didn't know what structured authoring was. We had to meet ATA's requirements. We had to basically throw everything away that we learned and relearn through XML and using Arbortext. And it was a good experience.
Okay. And so we got a couple more questions here. What were some of your best resources for setting up style sheets?
Basically, I took the old document, the old service bulletin, and I said, what do I want? And we went through and we created the regions. We created the content behind the cover page. And we didn't really have any resources, to be honest with you, other than using our existing Word document as an example of what we wanted to do. We knew that we wanted to change the paragraphing and bring it more modern. We knew that we had to do on the footer, we had to include the document number and pages and things like that. And we literally just started from scratch. I didn't have any resources.
Okay, thank you. One more question. Did you find starting with the implementation roadmap workshop was useful to your team and impactful to your project success?
Yes, I think it was. We did a lot of reading on the side, and using the roadmap was a good success. A lot of it was talking with with the two other people in the group, the authors. I leaned on their experience a little bit, and some of it was just gut feeling. Where do I want to go? And we had to figure all that out at the same time.
Okay, thank you. One more, any end user reactions?
I've had a lot of good feedback from customers, our quality team, a couple VPs, our vice presidents in the company, have all liked the new format. So we're actually being encouraged to expand into other aspects of tech data.
Are you still publishing to a PDF? Is that your output then? Right
now it is, but we do have capability for EPUBs, and I'm setting up the style style sheet to publish the content directly as we need it in an EPUBs format.
Okay.
And surely your throughput just in itself has to be a good testament to what you've done. So, you know, that's kudos to you and your team, I think. So
yeah, fortunately, I've been very fortunate with my management, and they see it, and they know that our backlog is a lot lower. We have some documents that are actually 150 pages long. Some of them are only 10 pages long, but with the XML formatting and the Arbortext, it's made it a lot simpler to structure a new document and release it.
So a question for me then, are you using a CMS like Windchill, and are you applying lifecycle states to reuse that data? So if you've got a topic, are you approving it and then it can automatically be reused, or are you taking it still on a per document basis?
We use the CMS function within Windchill. We created a new context within Windchill, but for just our authoring. And we do it one document by document. We don't have, most of our documents are one-offs, and we don't have the luxury of being able to share some of the content. Now, some of the things that we do share are like warnings, specific warnings and cautions, and maybe a symbol, you know, for reading a manual, the little triangle symbol and stuff like that. But that's about as far as we go right now with it.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions? I don't see any in the Q&A. If you have a question, please enter it into the Q&A. Okay, so great job. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Well,
Patty, are you guys ready to share the Arbortext product updates?
Sure, we can take over.
Okay.
Let me just get this here.
Okay, we can see your screen.
You got my screen. Okay, good. Awesome. So, hi, I'm Patty Lutzke. I'm Director of Product Management for the Arbortext Business Unit. And, you know, I have to admit that for several days, I've been thinking, oh, how am I going to keep product managers to only 30 minutes? There's 3 of us and we have to present. So now it looks like maybe we have a little more time, and that's awesome. So I'm going to cover editor, publishing engine, and some Windchill updates. And then Simon Taylor will talk about Arbortext Layout Editor and Arbortext Layout Developer. And then Gil Schreutman will talk about Arbortext content delivery. First, I'll just cover a high-level Arbortext release timeline. So, as you can see, we have delivered Arbortext 8.1, Arbortext Layout Editor and Developer 12.1. That was back last October. And then in the same time frame, we also had Arbortext Content Delivery 7.1.4. Then earlier this year, we had our 8.1.01, 12.1.01, which were just minor updates. And then this past April was our maintenance releases, 8.1.10 and 12.1.10. And then any day now, probably within a week or two, we'll be releasing a maintenance update on our 8.0 branch. So these other releases were on the 8.1 and 12.1 branch, and then on the 8.0, 12.0 branch, we do have this 8.0, 2.0, 12.0, 2.0 coming out soon. Then looking forward, and of course, forward-looking information is always subject to change, but looking forward in Q4 of our fiscal year, so that's between now and September, we have a release of Arbortext Content Delivery 7.1.5.0, and then currently targeted for the end of the calendar year, so between October and December, there will be another batch of releases. So we'll have our Arbortext 8.1.2.0 and then 12.1.2.0 for the ALD, ALE. And also there'll be update to Arbortext Content Delivery 7.2. So what we'll go over is kind of some advanced information about these releases that are coming up later this calendar year. And, you know, of course, it's always subject to change. So what I decided to do, because as I said, I thought I only had 10 minutes. So I just picked a couple of the big highlights that I can talk about for 8.1.2.0. And so that's what I'll go over. The first one is that in 8.1.2.0, editor will have increased knowledge of the information in Windchill as far as whether an object can or cannot be checked out. So one example is with CMS lifecycle states. So in the past, if an object was, for instance, in the release state so that an editor was not able to check it out, it would still appear in the CMS browser as though you could check it out, and then you try to do it and get an error. And this was something, needless to say, was quite annoying. And in the last live symposium that we had in Ann Arbor, I think this was the most requested item that I heard there. So now, if there is an object, even though it's not currently checked out, if for some reason, like for instance, it's in the released lifecycle state, you will see right in the object properties, and you see that on the left there, it'll say cannot be checked out. And then it may be a little hard to see, but in the CMS browser on the right, you can see the green arrows are pointing, the icon will be grayed out. And it didn't come through great in the screenshot, but it's a little easier to see, you know, in real life. So that's hopefully coming in 8.1.2.0 again, kind of towards the end of this calendar year. The other one is that, as many of you know, beginning with the 8.1 release, we have been working on the general area of security for Arbortext publishing engine. And so in 8.1.2.0, what we'll be adding is authentication when you're doing a publish job from editor. So if you turn on the security framework and you've got it set up for Arbortext Publishing Engine, this will allow you to secure the publishing requests that come from editor. And the idea is that when you're using Arbortext Editor, the first time that you send a publish job, then whatever login page that you configured for your Arbortext Publishing Engine, it will be presented to you from editor, and you would enter your credentials at that time. And then for the rest of your edit session, you would be able to do as many published jobs as you wish. This particular screenshot, what it's showing is in the preferences dialog, when you first set up the server name for your publishing engine, that would be another time when it would present you with the login information, login form for you to give your information. And in general, we're continuing to work on security and the ability to work with the security framework in Publishing Engine. Now, as has happened in previous releases, there are some areas that we're deprecating with this upcoming release. One is we are going to remove support for the compact installer. You still will be able to deploy your customizations in the custom folder via our zipped customization capability, but the ability to sort of include your customizations in with a compact installer deploy kit is what we're removing support for. We're also removing the SOAP support in Publishing Engine. This has been deprecated for quite a while, and it's just going to be removed now. And then the file parameter of F equals convert requests for Publishing Engine will also be deprecated. This shouldn't affect applications in that you're still able to send the document to convert in a post request. So send the document along to Publishing Engine. It's just this file parameter would allow you to convert something that was already on the Publishing Engine server, and that'll be deprecated going forward. And as I said, those are some high-level preview of what's coming in Editor at Publishing Engine. We will no doubt do a more thorough webinar when it gets closer that'll have details about specifically, what we'll be releasing at that time. I did want to, though, mention a couple of items of something that just was released. The Windchill 12.0.20 was released, I believe it was last week. And there are a couple of updates for the service parts information and instructions. That's, for those of you that don't know, that's the new name for what used to be referred to as Service Information Manager and Service Parts. And this is another request, that kind of a long-standing request, in that you will now be able to manage your translation packages in Windchill. Previously, there was a requirement that you had to have a shared folder on your Windchill server, and translation packages would be deposited in that folder, and then when they were ready to be imported, you would put it in the import folder. But now you can manage them in Windchill itself, and the idea is that they get created in the in-work state, and then you can download the contents or ask your vendors to download the contents directly. Once the contents have been translated, you just check in a new version of it. And when it's ready to be imported as new versions of the translations, you set the workflow state to the appropriate value, and then it'll be processed exactly as it used to be processed in that shared folder. And the thing that's important about this is it does help with the general direction that Windchill is going in, that some of you have heard of sort of being able to be more of a SaaS offering or more of a cloud-ready offering. So here you don't have to open a particular folder in order to use translation management. And then one other feature for Windchill 12.0.20, again, that was just released, is that we now support the structure comparison for information structures or publication structures. And what's nice about this is it makes it easy, for instance, to compare different versions of the same structure. In this screenshot, what I'm showing is comparing sort of the A2 version where we added another information group to the A1 version. But also if you are, for instance, using structures that are generated from a template, you would be able to compare the different structures generated from the same template, or really, whatever comparison makes sense for your business purpose. So those are the highlights that I wanted to show. Before I turn it over to, or I guess before I take questions and then turn it over to Simon, I do want to mention that we do have a survey regarding this symposium that PTC user has put on for us. I'll put the link in the chat so that you will be able to respond to the survey. But it's sort of exciting. It's a audio or video response. So essentially, you won't have to type your answers. You'll be able to just speak your answers into the website, and then we'll capture that and be able to get your feedback on the symposium. And we really encourage. We'd love to hear your feedback. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Patty. We do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So the first one is which Arbortext editor version will support integrated animations and or videos?
Well, we did add support for publishing media files. We added some support for that in I think it was 8.1, but Simon maybe can take up.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Is that right? Wasn't it 8.1?
Yes.
As far as viewing them in the editor interface, it's not directly in the window, but we also, in the same release in 8.1, improved the ability to kind of double click on a multimedia file and then launch the appropriate viewer from inside Arbortext Editor.
Okay, thank you. Next question, can the publish engine authentication be pulled from the editor session login?
Currently, I guess currently the answer would be no. I mean, we don't entirely have an editor session login when you're using your desktop Arbortext editor. In the past, we would just use your Windows login name as your username for instance, knowing which Q job was yours. So going forward, if you've configured Publishing Engine to require authentication, you would have to authenticate according to the way you've set up your Tomcat.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for Patty? All right, thank you, Patty.
Okay, great. I think it's on to Simon now.
Simon, do you want to share your screen?
Okay,
Simon, you're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry. Everything moved as soon as Patty stopped showing her screen. Hopefully you can see my screen now, can you?
It's coming up now.
Okie dokie.
Okay, yep, now I can see it. Thank you.
So this is going to be a slightly elongated version of the session that I planned, but hopefully everybody will get some value from it. I'm sure everybody knows who I am. I'm the product manager for Arbortext Styler and layout developer. So I wanted to give you an update of what's coming in the next release, which Patty, there it is. Patty mentioned is October, hopefully this year. So we'll talk about 8.1.2.0 and we'll talk about layout developer, 12.1.2.0, what's coming in that, and then we'll have a quick look at a product we released last October, but there's been a fair bit of interest about it, so I wanted to talk about it a little bit more, point some people in the right direction to find out more information about the product. So not a huge amount going into Styler 8.1.2.0, except this major feature here, which is updating how Styler handles CSS. So at the moment, as you probably already know, that you can generate your CSS when you're publishing to HTML files and HTML chunks. You can either put it in the HTML file header, or you can have it as a separate CSS file. You can either generate that CSS based on the context and condition information, or you can generate it based only on the property sets. So, you know, that's served us fairly well for quite a long time. But what I wanted to do in this release is allow users to customize the CSS which comes out of Styler. So this comes with a couple of new features. So the first bit is that you can now associate external CSS files with your HTML that comes out of when you're publishing through Styler. So in a previous release, I can't remember which one it was, a couple of releases ago, you could start associating external JavaScript with your HTML files if you wanted to like add some scripting to it or sort of hook in something like jQuery, that kind of thing. So now you can associate externally written CSS files. So why would you want to do that? Well, you might have some extra styling which is not available through the Styler UI. But you also might want to, for example, include some media tests if you want to do some responsive HTML. And you'd have those in your external CSS files with the media tests surrounding the extra bits of code. You can link those in. And so whenever your window size changes when you're viewing the HTML, that you can flick to those externally specified CSS definitions, which is pretty cool. In addition to that, we wanted to allow users to create their own CSS style definitions in this release. So we've added a new tab along the sort of the tab in the Styler UI showing the definitions. Right down at the far end, there's now a CSS style definition tab. And in there, you can create your own style sheet objects which contain your own CSS. So again, if you wanted to extend what's already being created by Styler, or you wanted to override it entirely with something of your own writing, then you can do that now through the Styler UI. So you'll have the ability to create your own CSS style definitions. So it'll just create a block of CSS. You get a text editor in which you can write your own. We don't do any validation of that. It's going to be entirely up to the user to make sure that they're writing decent CSS. But then, yeah, that's true for JavaScript or any of the other source edits that we do. So yes, you'll be able to write your own CSS. And then if you want to use them on the HTML attribute dialog box, which you can access through the HTML tagging category in the Styler UI, couldn't remember the name of it. You can specify the class attribute and you can now link to one of the CSS style definitions that you've got inside your style sheet. Okay, so that when you go to publish, then instead of pointing to the sort of automatically generated style, you can now point to your own custom version of that style, and you can do whatever you like in there. It's sort of the world's your oyster as far as creating those sort of styles are concerned. So you can use any of the stuff which is available in CSS3 for when you're publishing your HTML. So hopefully this is going to give you a lot more flexibility with the CSS that you can generate using Styler. You can do a lot more stuff that you want to do. If you can't find how to do it through the Styler UI, then you can extend it and do some really good stuff. I think the HTML stuff has kind of lagged behind a little bit in Styler, so it's good to add some extra HTML features which allow people to create better looking HTML. So that's the major Styler update. Let's move on to Layout Developer. So as you know, Layout Developer is our kind of high-end page layout tool. You use it for creating templates to publish to PDF. You can either deploy those templates in Layout Developer on the desktop, or you can deploy them under Publishing Engine and publish your XML to PDF using Layout Developer templates. So this is a very well-established tool. It's been kicking around for quite a long time. So we wanted to add some sort of extra new features to it. So firstly, continuing the theme of CSS improvements across the board, we're allowing users to use CSS to style XML content in a paged environment. So this has been quite a big project. We did stage 1 in the previous release, and this is stage 2. And I'm sure there's going to be a stage 3 where we refine it and add some extra functionality to it. But at the moment, you'll be able, well, in this release, you'll be able to associate a CSS style sheet and CSS styles with your XML content, and then use that CSS styling information to apply style to your printed layout. So you can layer that CSS stuff on top of the sort of traditional methods of working with it with Layout Developer, of using either tag matching or context matching, and the CSS stuff can sit on top of that. So you can get like say 60–70% of your layout defined using CSS, and then do the fine tuning using the traditional methods if that's the way you want to do it. So the reason for doing this was to really to make Layout Developer a bit more accessible to the types of developers who are comfortable working with our kind of tools. So that'd be web developers. A lot of people might already have some CSS style sheets kicking around, which gets them most of the way there for their web output. So they might want to deploy that within their print output. So this gives them a bit of an advantage there too. But for me, really, there's a bit of a competitive gap closure with this feature, but also it's that lowering the barrier of entry into people using Layout Developer and making it a lot more friendly. So as I said, this is part 2 of a big project. We are pretty much there at the moment with what we want to do with it. We're just sort of fine-tuning some stuff, but it looks pretty good. Second on this list of updates for Layout Developer, then updates to the debugger. So Layout Developer's debugger lets you write code and find out what's going on in your output. You can view like what gets formatted on the page, and you can write code and put breakpoints in there, that kind of thing. What's been missing previously to this release is an idea of what pages you got in the document. So we're going to provide a page tree interface. So you'll be able to have a look at the document and see what is on each of the pages within that document, and drill down into the individual frames, and then see what content's inside those. You'll also be able to preview graphics. And again, this is something which has been missing from the debugger. If you have a raster graphic which is linked to your document, you'll be able to preview that in the debugger to make sure that you've got exactly the right graphic in the right place. I'm making changes to the interface and the toolbars in this release. So Layout Developer's toolbars and dialog boxes are a little bit old-fashioned, so we're making some redesigns of those and making them a lot more sort of functional and easier to use. We're also adding a lot of the features which we've provided in the past, now available through these dialog boxes. So things which have been added recently have traditionally been missing from those dialog boxes, and we're making sure that those are in there. The styling, paragraph, and frame properties dialog boxes tend to be spread across quite a few different dialog boxes, and this initiative is to provide all those in a single place so you can access that stuff nicely. We're providing a couple of new toolbars as well so that you can work sort of more interactively, and this kind of feeds into the layout editor idea, and I'll talk about layout editor in a sec. We're updating some libraries. In a previous release, we provided MathJax library for formatting MathML to SVG. So we're making updates to that, and hopefully that is going to include better line breaking control, which is provided in version 3 of the MathJax library. And to go with that, we want to improve our SVG support, and that means supporting curves better and sort of drawing better quality SVG in the output, so the mathematics is more scalable. We're also going to be updating our barcode library. For those who don't know, Layout Developer has a library built in which generates a graphic of a barcode. We support 30 or 40 different types of barcodes. You can give it a string and it will return you a graphic of the barcode that you want, including QR codes, that kind of thing, which you can then output onto your page. So it can generate those things automatically, so you don't have to provide a graphic for it, and you're not relying on special barcode fonts in order to generate your barcode. We made an update to our OpenType support in the previous maintenance release. With 12.1.00, we introduced OpenType support. One of the restrictions there was that inline kerning couldn't work because the shaping of the words and the kerning was meant to be provided by fonts. So what we've did in this release was allow inline kerning to work, but what we do now is break up the word into chunks and shape the individual chunks, and then apply kerning between those chunks if you have the kerning stuff set up. So that meets a very specific customer requirement of being able to specify kerning between characters, but also extends our OpenType support, which is really nice. Another new feature we provided in this one is to allow users, we call it shape-shifting, and that's allow users to move the return glyphs from the word shaping engine in both horizontal and vertical directions. And so if you have an accent character which follows a letter, for example, you can minutely adjust the position of that accent over that base character. So if you don't like what the font has provided you, you can override it with some horizontal and vertical positioning. This is particularly useful for sort of the more complex languages like those from Asia and from the Middle East. So that's provided was provided in 12.1.1.0, but the other stuff is coming in 12.1.2.0. So now let's talk about Layout Editor. I wanted to cover this because we've had quite a lot of people asking about what it is and what it's going to be used for. So in the previous release in October, we released a new product. The idea of this new product was to provide a lower cost, more simple version of Layout Developer to users who are only going to be building stuff by hand and working with documents by hand. So it's based entirely on the Layout Developer application, but it has a simplified user interface and simplified functionality, which restricts people from using all the Layout Developer sort of template development code. It more or less relies on template developers having provided tools to their end users to be able to do stuff by hand. So in a traditional sort of publishing environment, somebody will create a document automatically using the Layout Developer template, and then they would open it up in the desktop product and then sort of manipulate stuff. They might make text corrections, they might move frames and pages around to make it look really, really nice. Layout Developer was a bit of a heavy hitting tool for that kind of workflow. So we provide now Layout Editor to allow users to do that in a more simplified and cheaper environment, which is great. With that product, we enhance Layout Developer and therefore Layout Editor to provide a lot of tools and users to be able to create bespoke interfaces for their templates, so that a lot of the scratching your head wondering where to find a certain feature kind of processes are now removed from the Layout Editor users. It's relying on custom interfaces to be able to provide that kind of workflow set of tools for their end users. If you want to find out more about it, I've put up the URL for a video that we have on YouTube, which has a more of an in-depth introduction to what Layout Editor is and how it works, that kind of thing. This graphic here really provides where we see Layout Editor fitting into the rest of what we do. So here we have, up in the top left, we have Layout Developer. So people will create templates either for Publishing Engine or for Layout Editor or for Layout Developer. If they're going to use Publishing Engine, content would be provided by Arbortext Editor. Make a publishing request to Publishing Engine that would use the template, and you could churn out from there a Layout Editor file, which Layout Editor users can then open up in their desktop, tweak the finished article to make it look absolutely perfect, and then publish their PDFs from it. Alternatively, the template developers could provide Layout Editors with a native template, so they could build their documents in a semi-automated kind of environment, getting input from the user about where the content stream comes from, how they want certain pages to look. The Layout Editor user can then finish the document by moving stuff around, making corrections, and then publish their PDF. So again, this is covered in that presentation that's on YouTube, but I wanted to give a bit of an overview of how it fits into the system and what the product is. So that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about. Have we got any questions for me about that stuff?
I don't, excuse me, I don't see any questions in the question and answer section.
Cool.
Does anybody have a question for Simon?
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
You all know where to find me if you want to ask me any questions.
Oh, yeah, so we have one. How is this different from Styler?
So Styler is our multi-channel publishing tool, style sheet development tool. And as such, it is a fairly simplistic application for creating style sheets. You can do quite a lot in Styler, but you can't do everything that Layout Developer can do. Layout Developer is entirely dedicated to paged formatting. So that means PDFs and PostScript, that kind of thing. But it has a lot more layout capabilities that allow you to automate pretty much any type of output that you would want to do on a page. Layout Editor builds on that technology to provide a sort of more simple environment for people to finish their documents. So not every type of document can be 100% automated. So you might want to get people to 90% of the way there and then allow a desktop user to tweak it. Maybe they want to move a bit of text around on the page. Maybe they want to position a graphic in exactly the right place. Maybe they want to fill up some white space by changing some styling, that kind of thing. So Layout Editor is there really to provide a sort of more simple tool for it. It's not, Layout Editor is not a style sheet development tool. Layout Developer is the template development tool for things like Layout Editor and for our PDF output. Hopefully that covers the answer.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions for Simon? Okay, thank you, Simon. Joe, I think you're up.
Yeah, hello everyone. Let me take sharing here, just a second. Yeah. Okay, so Simon, could you please stop sharing? It doesn't let me do it. Thanks.
Okay, we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gil Schreutmann. I'm the product manager for Arbortext Symposium Delivery, working by this organization here at PTC. And today I will be giving you some heads up and updates regarding our next coming release plans for Arbortext Symposium Delivery. So with that, I'll start with the next release, which is going to be 7150, and the release to market date is currently planned to be end of July, a month away. And I guess in terms of release highlights, I think one of the most important things that we did in this version was to extend the deployment scale. So up until this version, we used to, I think the average deployment scale was around 2,000 users, concurrent users. And we have managed to basically multiply, or actually get to a point where we can support up to 4 times that size. So around 8,500 concurrent users. That's the total count that ACD is currently capable of supporting. So that means a lot in terms of deployment and adoption of ACD, because it allows you to start small and then gradually grow your deployment based on expansions or any deployment needs that our customers have. And along the same lines, we also provided some, or will be providing very detailed recommendations for sizing that goes through a typical small, medium versus large deployment scales for both on-prem and cloud deployments. And we're also introducing another ability to be able to split the user's load across multiple site groups for better load balancing of users. So this will allow you to better handle cases where your deployment is global or spread across different geographical sites, and you don't want one to impact the other. And I provided some example here on the diagram, which kind of resembles the large deployment scale that we are targeting. So this gives you a sense of how many viewers or the different sites that are being set up for Europe versus Asia Pacific versus China in this case, and the scale of the data set that it's supporting currently. So around 60 product families and 5,000 product versions or models. So that's quite significant and impressive achievement of ACD 715. The other thing that we've made or accomplished in this version is the ability to become better aligned with our manufacturing industry needs, or basically any OEM that's generating or maintaining VIN or cell numbers in its systems. And as part of that, what we did is provided a mapping and ability to automatically set the options and choices based on a predefined mapping, or based on the ones that are relevant for a given cell number, so that once you are the end user is browsing through the system, you will automatically be getting the relevant filter set applied to the cell number or VIN that's being selected. So in this case, I'm just selecting here in the diagram the SUV cell number, and then you automatically get the relevant filters applied to that to the viewer here, which would be the relevant accessories, colors, or country specification. And that's quite important, so that the user won't waste time on determining or wondering what are the filters that are actually applicable to that given equipment. And at the end of the day, we'll be able to serve or service the equipment in a more efficient way. So that's one of the things that we've made. And along the same lines, we also kind of repurposed or use ACD as a kind of built-in repository for VIN or cell numbers. And we are supporting this feature for both for data bundles that are coming either through Windchill SPII or SIM, or through a third-party format that's being loaded through the CSV tool. The other next big achievement that we've made in this version was the ability to improve the GUI responsiveness to be able to be used on any mobile device. So up until this version, we had these fundamental capabilities as part of our technology, but we didn't reach the size that's expected for mobile devices. So we only supported this up to a tablet size of screen. But with 715, we have expanded the footprint, and we are capable of letting to use ACD on pretty much any mobile device up to the screen size that's specified here. So it's going to be either Android, iOS, or any Windows mobile screen size of 4.7 inch. And we also recommend our end users to use portrait orientation, which gives you the best results in terms of user experience. So what we basically did, we didn't change anything significant in the look and feel or the user experience. We just extended the existing responsiveness capabilities that were there in the product, but we kind of optimized it for a much smaller size of screen. So that's what we did with web mobile support. And I attached a couple of examples in here, and hopefully we, on the next opportunity, we'll be able to share some demos on the What's New session that will be planned in a couple of months. But that's quite exciting for this version. The other feature improvement that we introduced in this version is the ability to add an entire part list to a shopping cart. So up until now, you obviously add an option to do it, but for discrete or single part line items. But this new feature gives you a quick way or shortcut to add the entire part list items in a bulk. And it also allows you to modify its quantities. And there is special user preference that lets you determine the adding logic for superseded parts. So it's quite useful, and it saves a lot of time and energy when it comes to the ability to order the entire part list. Another feature that we have introduced in 715 is dealing or some improvements around the 3D graphics or viewer that's built into ACD with the ability to detach a part from the assembly so that the end user can better investigate or drill down into the details when he's serving an equipment in the field. So let's say that you want to uncover the assembly here by taking out the part that's been highlighted. All you have to do is simply click on that part and click on that transform icon from the toolbar here, and it will allow you to detach it from the main assembly and separate it for better visibility and interactiveness with the 3D graphics being displayed here. So it's quite useful and a powerful feature to use for field technicians. And other than this, we also introduced some small alignments or improvements on existing features. So one of the key things that we did is to expose the related documents hyperlink for part line items or parts that are available in the system. So once you're browsing through the content, you will now see an indication or kind of related document or hyperlink indication for part-related documents, and you will be able to easily navigate to those documents by clicking on that link. And that's obviously supported on any on both the desktop as well as the mobile app or mobile viewer that we've introduced. The other feature is some elements around custom attribute support. So we introduce the out-of-the-box support for custom attributes in 7.1.4, but some of the pieces there weren't perfectly aligned. So those custom attributes that were added through the administration utility weren't exposed on all of the pages. So we now completed or aligned that gap with its exposure on the shopping cart pages, both the Excel spreadsheet export as well as the cart page itself when you would like to print it out. So it's perfectly aligned right now, and all the custom attributes are being exposed properly. And last but not least, we also introduced a couple of software compatibility updates with a couple of new versions, including Windows Server 2019, Red Hat Linux 8.3, another database configuration option with PostgreSQL 12.4, Microsoft SQL Server 2019, and we also updated the Wildfly, JBoss Wildfly version that's bundled in ACD that came with a couple of important security fixes. So that's all for 7.1.5. That's coming out very soon. The next coming release after that will be 7.2, as Patty mentioned, and its projected RTM or release to market date is currently end of December this year. And this version will contain a couple of important features. I will not go through all of them right now, but I do want to focus or give you some highlights on a couple. And I think the most important one is the Java 11 update. So we are updating the Java version that's compatible with ACD with this version. That's going to be Java 11. And with that in mind, I think that we also recommend all our customers to skip 7.1.5 and adopt 7.2 directly, if possible. So this will give you a longer support period till December 2024 for ACD, and as well as avoid the additional support costs for Oracle Java 8. So as you might know already, Oracle ends its premier support period for Java 8 by March 2022. And beyond that date, if you are staying with this version or with earlier ACD 7.1 version, you will be forced to pay extra to get the extended support from Oracle. And hence why we are suggesting this path to update directly to 7.2 in order to avoid those extra charges. So we highly recommend all our customers to wait another couple of months and adopt 7.2 if possible. And the other big improvement or highlight that I would like to focus on for 7.2 will be the replacement or retirement of Windchill DS. So Windchill DS is the PTC homegrown solution for directory services. And PTC has made a decision to discontinue its development and support. So that happened around December 2020 across all its product. And we are also adopting that change or following that guideline with 7.2, ACD 7.2. And we are kind of decoupling it from ACD itself. We'll be providing documented instructions to configure or support ACD with any V3 LDAP compliant option. And we'll be also providing some suggested configuration path with OpenDJ. That's an open source that's available that could be used as an alternative. and we will be taking care of providing all the necessary migration scripts and anything along those lines to make the transition as smooth and simple as possible. And with that, I think that's pretty much all I have for the updates today. We'll be happy to pick up questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Gil. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please enter them into the question and answer interface. I currently don't see any. We'll give 1 minute here. Anybody got a question? Okay, I don't see any questions come through, so I think that'll be it for today. On the behalf of PTC User, I'd like to thank the presenters, so the customer presenters, PTC, and all of the people that have attended. And I'd like to throw out one last reminder that we will have our next technical committee meeting on July 29th from 10 to 11 Central Time. So if you're not currently a member, please join PTC User and the technical committee. And if you are, please plan to attend. We'll be sending out meeting invites on that very shortly. So we'll be adding those in, and you'll see those show up in your calendar in the next day or two. So.
And Paul, also, I just also want to really thank everyone, all the presenters for presenting. I'd also like to thank everyone who attended. You know, we really appreciate it. And as I mentioned earlier, we'd love to get your feedback on the survey as well.
Okay, yep, yeah. So I did see the link in the survey come through in the chat window. So if anybody wants to take the survey, it is in the chat. So please find that and go ahead and take the survey for PTC. Brian or Dan, anything you'd like to add before we conclude?
No, I think great job, everyone. So thanks.
And thank you again to all the presenters. And on that, we'll conclude for today. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks,
Thanks,
Brian.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.